Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast presented by BetMGM. We have made it. We are here in Omaha, not really in spirit. Colin soon to be actually there physically on the diamond at Charles Schwab Field. He'll get into everything that is around the sport, not just the play in between the lines, but Rocco's Jello shots, all of the atmosphere, all of the energy, bringing 8 fan bases because that's where we are in the college postseason. We have 8 teams left. They have made it to the College World Series. We have some usuals who are in the top 10 for the entire season. And we have some, Cinderellas, so to speak, that put it together late in the year. Talking about the Florida Gators, the NC State Wolfpack got their bullpen together. They've been playing great as well. We're going to break down bracket 1, bracket 2. We're going to talk losers bracket. We're going to talk win situation over the weekend. We have everything covered, and Colin's our man to walk us through it. So, Colin, how are you feeling ahead of your trip to Omaha, Nebraska?
Well, I'm a little sad that the Razorbacks are there, which could be they're not there, which could be a good or a bad thing, because I definitely wouldn't want to witness what happened in 2018, where they were one strike away from winning the national title. But at the same time, I get to focus on new schools going to Omaha for the first time. Specifically, I'm talking about Kentucky and Big Blue Nation. I created a Jello shot odds board. I believe the video will be out from Action Network sometime today. I've got Kentucky and Tennessee right up there. I mean, Big Blue Nation, you just lost Coach Cal. You lost in the first round of March Madness. That means you have a lot of travel money in your back pocket, even though you went to the Gator Bowl and a couple months ago too. But you've got traveling money to burn because you lost to Oakland in basketball. So I expect to see a ton of Big Blue Nation, which is going to be great. I hope that they dominate that Jello shot board.
Now, putting your odds aside for which fan base will down, eat, drink, as I said, I don't know which one it is for Jello shots. Which flavor are you looking forward to enjoying with Pete Rudin the most?
Orange, actually. I am a fan of orange Mio drinks. I'm a fan of any kind of orange crush, Fanta. It doesn't matter. Put orange in front of me, I'll have it. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of Tennessee. I'm interested where the Who's going to be orange. Are they going to be a different color? I don't know. But if you got some orange in you, maybe Florida, I'm a fan. I'm going to be having some of your Jello shots.
All right, we're going to start with that Virginia team that you spoke about just now because we're looking at bracket 1. We'll get into bracket 2 in just a minute. I'll go through their odds to win the College World Series and just kind of do a bit of table setting on each matchup. So North Carolina, Virginia, an ACC battle here in bracket 1. The Tar Heels 7-1 to win this whole thing. Virginia 10-1. And the Wahoos are 5-0 in the postseason. I know that they got to host a regional. Still a little bit surprising that they're unblemished through the first 2, the regionals and the super regionals on their way to Omaha. But they won all but one game by 2 runs or more. They pounded K-State in Charlottesville in the super regionals 17-8 over 2 games. They also won their season series with North Carolina, scoring 28 runs in 3 games. That's critical when you look at the series price in this one. And UVA is doing it with their bats. They can really hit their top 20 in homers, 6th in on base percentage, 4th in slugging, 2nd in batting average, 8, count them, 8 players in this lineup hit over 300. That is absolutely incredible. So there's no letdown spot, no spot that you can kind of pitch around in this match, in this lineup, because Virginia is stacked top to bottom. It was a tougher road for North Carolina in the regionals. They needed 3 games against LSU to get over the hump, but they did it. And in the supers, they beat Virginia 8-6 and 2-1. North Carolina, it's simple. They need their staff to pitch really well in Omaha to get this done. They're certainly capable, and they're in the mix for, I would argue, the best staff in Omaha. They're 15th in ERA, top 30 in WHIP, and their pen built around Matthias and Dalton Pence is rock solid. So let's get into it now, Colin. What are your thoughts on this matchup? Do you think Virginia has legs at 10-1 as an interesting long shot to win this national championship?
I definitely like them here in the first game against North Carolina. The run line is going to be the play, and it's just from a recency of what's going on with Jason DeCaro to what happened the weekend of April 4th when these two teams actually played each other. I know that there's been some complaints that the ACC and SEC are taking up all the spots in the College World Series. But guess what? That means we get historical things to look at. These two teams played each other. Virginia and North Carolina went at it. This is one of the few times North Carolina, I believe, lost a series. And specifically in the game that Jason DeCaro pitched, which was game 2, he got torn up for 6 earned runs. It did not look good whatsoever. Now, who was flaming on the other side? Evan Blanco, who's this exact pitching matchup that's going on here. So if you take out that April 5th box score, you'd think, oh my gosh, North Carolina is in a lot of trouble. But then you look at what Jason DeCaro did in the supers. It wasn't pretty either. He got torn up a little bit. He pitched in the final game, and they were running out of arms after a long weekend with LSU. He did not look good in his 2 innings either. I believe this is going to be DeCaro's spot. I don't think it would be Sprague. I project this Evan Blanco minus 130. This Virginia number came out, I think, plus 180, plus 150. It has trickled all the way down to plus 110. Like I said, there's no run lines out there right now, but Evan Blanco is the hotter pitcher. Jason DeCaro, a freshman, a deer in the headlights in Omaha, being the person to throw the very first pitch as a freshman. Count me in for Virginia plus 1.5 here. Now, this bracket, I think we should get through Florida State and Tennessee before we talk about the bracket, but I think that there is going to be a deep loser bracket run from this next game that we talk about.
If you could just explain a bit of the bracket system, it's not like the way that basketball works where there's one side of the bracket and the other, there's a winner and a loser's bracket. Just explain that to our audience.
Yeah, so we're going back to what we do in regionals. We have teams of 4. They play double elimination. And 2 and Q, you're out. But you have to lose twice to get out of this round. And then out of those 4 teams, which this behaves just like regionals when they have their hosts, after that, they'll have a bracket champion. So you'll be able to find odds on either to make the championship round or to win their bracket. So we're talking about bracket 1. And when bracket 1 and bracket 2 crown a champion, which should be next Wednesday-ish, maybe Thursday-ish if the loser's bracket plays out, that'll leave 2 teams. They will play in the super regionals format, which is a best 2 of 3 in the championship series. So if your team gets beat, you're not out, but you better have the pitching staff to get through a loser's bracket with all these other teams, especially when you're playing conference opponents that have seen your bullpen before.
So we joked a bit. It's the SEC ACC Invitational here. We finally have a head-to-head between the 2 conferences. Tennessee against Florida State. Tennessee, the odds-on favorite to win in Omaha, plus 260. Florida State at 8-1 out of the market. It took the Vols 3 games, but they turned the Cinderella back into a pumpkin. They finally got over the hump against Evansville, and their offense was red hot all weekend. They scored 31 runs in those 3 games. This is the best offense left in the field, top to bottom, in my opinion. They're second in slugging, second in homers. You need doubles in those big alleys in Omaha. They got it. They hit 150 doubles this season, which was 3rd nationally. The pitching staff has had dominant runs, but they got banged around by the aces in the super regionals, particularly in those first 2 games. Will they pitch Stamos on Friday? That's a question in terms of how they deal with their pitching staff. Florida State, meanwhile, they're a perfect 5-0 on their run to Omaha. They beat a 4 seed and a 3 seed in the regionals when facing Stetson and UCF, and then they scored 34 runs in 2 games against a totally overmatched UConn staff. The Noles are sound top to bottom. When you look at their entire resume, they're top 50 in ERA, 18th in fielding percentage. They get on base, and they have a top 10 power lineup to be able to drive those runners in. The question here for me is Jamie Arnold. He's 11-3 on the season, 2.77 ERA, 155 Ks in 102 innings worth of work. But UConn just roughed him up. 7 hits and 5 runs in his pitching opportunity, his start in the super regionals. Does he bounce back here against a Tennessee lineup that is really difficult? It's going to be yeoman's work. As I said, with the Virginia lineup, there's no moment to exhale. Same with this Volunteers lineup. Is this a must-win with Arnold going? Is Florida State basically flushing their hopes down the toilet if they don't get a win? But if they do, 8-1 seems pretty tasty. What are your thoughts on the Seminoles?
Well, this number is coming down in favor of Florida State. I think a wrong number was posted completely. There was a plus 180 out there in Florida State in this game. It is all the way down to plus 140 at a certain book that I'm looking at. And I believe they posted odds based on thinking that Carson Dorsey was going to go here and not Jamie Arnold. So if you have access to this, Jamie Arnold should be minus 130 in this matchup against Chris Stamos and AJ Causey. So let's cover both sides of this. Let's go to the Tennessee side first, because Tony Vitello, the head coach of Tennessee, decided back in mid-April in an LSU series that AJ Causey was not going to be a starter anymore, that he was going to come out of the bullpen. And I've seen this story in college baseball before. We're going to take some guy in the bullpen who's not used very much. He's going to be the starter. We're going to try to get whatever we can. And the second that he has trouble, we're going to bring in this guy that should be the starter and let him roll. Now, the good news is AJ Causey's been on fire since he's been coming out of the bullpen. The bad news is Chris Stamos has been horrific as a starting pitcher. He averages 1.6 innings per outing, and he's usually giving up an earned run per inning pitch. So there is a window here for Florida State to jump on Tennessee early and get some runs on the board and support Jamie Arnold. But then when I turned around to the Florida State side, I went down a little bit of a rabbit hole. Can the Tennessee offense hit a left-handed slider? That's all I wanted to know. I must have spent 2 hours going down this rabbit hole to see if Tennessee could do this. And digging through some things with Evansville and the Purple Aces and what their head coach said, they obviously saw the tape of LSU's Nate Ackenhausen and Vanderbilt's JD Thompson, two lefties, two southpaws that shut down Tennessee late in the season. So you would think that Tennessee can't hit left-handed pitching. So the Purple Aces send three consecutive southpaws: Kenton Deaverman, Donovan Schultz, Kevin Reed, and oh, by the way, their closer, Jacob Mayer, also lefty. They're all lefties. They were torched. Tennessee absolutely blew the top off in that super regional from an offensive perspective. So there is an avenue for Tennessee to get on the board early against Jamie Arnold because they hit left-hand pitching so well. Specifically, they hit left-handed sliders. And there's an avenue for the Seminoles to get on the board because Chris Stamos will pitch until he gets in trouble, and that trouble could be 2 or 3 earned runs. The play in this game is the over. I'm a little nervous. So if you're looking for a side, Jamie Arnold should be the favorite. Hit that number. But from a total perspective, I make this game 12.1. Now, remember, this is the time where we're going to talk about park factors. Charles Schwab Field, which I apologize for calling it TD Ameritrade because I've been there so many times with my kids. It's just known it as TD Ameritrade. It's now Charles Schwab Field. Extremely cavernous, 335 down the pole lines, 375 in left and right center, 408 in center field. And oh, by the way, if that wind is blowing in from Iowa, you're not going to get much out. Well, guess what? First 2 days of this tournament, when the teams kick off, we're expecting 5 to 10 mile an hour winds with 15 mile an hour gusts coming in from left and right field at various points. Sometime around Sunday at 1 o'clock in the morning, when the losers brackets fire up, that wind is going to change and start shifting out, and we'll start looking for overs. In this game specifically, the numbers, the pitchers, what they do with left-handers, with Chris Stamos at Tennessee, everything says over, but price is going to be extremely important here. And we're doing this podcast without totals on the board. So I make this at 12.1. If it comes out any lower, you're going to take an over, or maybe you're playing an in-game over. But I'm saying that the lineups and the pitchers are conducive to the over. The wind is not. So price point's important. I'll be looking for an over, and my marker is 12.1.
With hurricane season on deck, do you also look at European wind models? Because I certainly do when I'm looking at the Caribbean. Do you look at multiple sources to get this wind information?
I have Windfinder, windy.com. I know a lot of you are out there. Where do you get this wind information? Where do you get this trajectory? Like I do it for college football stadiums too. Like you have to know your crosswind orientation. Some of your stadiums can have serious effects against arms that just can't throw it 20 yards. So yeah, I use different multiple wind trackers for those of you out there that ask, and I love to screenshot them and put them out there for everybody to look at. But yeah, I mean, the wind can change. I think if you're new to this, because college baseball is growing, I'm starting to find out like this sport is growing just exponentially. The wind is such a big deal in Omaha. The way that the stadium faces, it's either going out or it's coming in, and it can flip on a dime. I mean, we're talking maybe some Wrigley Field stuff, but the problem is this is a huge ballpark. So it does play a big factor for teams that are good in OBP and soft and slugging. They could do some damage and wind coming in their face because they never relied on home runs anyway. So keep that in mind here as we talk about the overall bracket. But weather is always a thing. Rain delays are always a thing, although it does look like we're clear the first 4 days of this tournament.
All right, turning to bracket number 2, another SEC ACC matchup. Kentucky plus 470 to win the national championship. NC State 11-1. And I got to put my hand up. I was wrong about NC State. I went through, looked at their season-long numbers, their much maligned pitching staff, particularly their bullpen, and I thought, well, they're going to get banged around by Georgia. Georgia doesn't lose on their home field. I kind of overlooked them. So I was clearly wrong in that case. As it turns out, they were able to hold Georgia to 1 run on their home diamond in an 18-1 rout. And then when it seemed like the dam was going to break in game 3, they just held it together. They hold them to 5 runs. They score 8. They win in Athens. They go on to Omaha. And what's interesting is that, when you look at throughout the season, their numbers, 154th in ERA, 98th in WHIP, their xFIP of 5.33. I'm throwing it out. I'm done with it. Teams like Florida, teams like NC State, they got hot at the right time. This wasn't just one weekend. This is regionals, now super regionals. I think I need to evaluate them in a different way. On the Cats side of things, first time for Big Blue Nation in Omaha. Is that going to factor in at all? We'll see. But the Cats are not a dominant hitting machine out of the SEC. Like so many of these programs that play in the Southeastern Conference, they are not looking to just beat teams, in terms of high scoring 8, 10, 12 run games. They're outside the top 50 in slugging, outside the top 50 in home runs, and they hit just 287 as a team, which is 105th in the country, one slot above Air Force. So when I look at this, they haven't lost yet in the postseason, which is great. And their pitching, it seems to be getting better. Their defense as well. In the last 4 games against Illinois, Indiana State, 2 against Oregon State, they've given up a grand total of 3 runs. So in terms of what they're doing to other lineups, they're putting the chokehold on them. This matchup is so interesting to me because just purely on the season-long stats, you would think that NC State has no chance. But with the lineup that the Wildcats bring to Omaha and NC State kind of surging at the right time in terms of their staff, cobbling together performances, I don't know. Maybe NC State is worth a look at 11-1. What are your thoughts?
Well, they're certainly getting the love in the early market here. This was a number that opened up Kentucky -170, which is exactly where I project the opening matchup of Trey Poozer versus Sam Highfill. It's taken some NC State money overnight as we record this here on Thursday morning. So if you look at season-long numbers, you're going to get pigeonholed into thinking Kentucky should be -170. The total should be 12.5. But if you look at recency, which if you pull out the last 15 games, it's a completely different NC State team. Despite ranking outside the top 50 in almost every important statistical category, this is the same NC State team that at the end of the season won series against Virginia and North Carolina. If you look at their last 15 games, they're 12th in all of Division I in on-base percentage. That plays heavy into Omaha. On-base means everything in this ballpark. Slapping doubles, it can be just as important as anything else. So NC State has been on fire from an on-base perspective. They're getting guys on. They are cashing that in to runs. And Kentucky, you can't say anything bad about Kentucky. We said this week after week. Low-scoring games, excellent pitching up and down through the bullpen, especially with Trey Poozer. And for me, it's these teams have identical xFIPs on the season. So the pitching staff from a bullpen, from a team staff, from the starters. After Sam Highfill, it gets a little worse for NC State in the numbers, but they should be able to hang here. And I think the other thing too is I like the under in this game simply because I don't see either team putting it over the fence. And there will be some on base, but like I said, this is some pitching staffs that's going to be able to control that. But I do like NC State +1.5. I am going to put more weight on what's happened in the last 15 games and what has happened at the end of their ACC run that has got them so hot than I am looking at season-long numbers that dictate NC State average 7.7 runs per game. That's not the same team that we're looking at right now. So I do like Wolfpack +1.5 in this opener against Trey Poozer, and I like the under in this game because nobody's getting over that fence. I'm sure there'll be a home run on the very first at bat, but generally nobody should be getting over the fence in this game.
All right, we close it up in bracket 2 with an SEC matchup. Texas A&M +350, the second favorite in Omaha, and Florida, preseason consensus top 3 team, left for dead at mid-year, lose to Vanderbilt in the first round of the SEC tournament, sneak in anyway, and the Gators are red hot, 13-1. You can actually find them at 15-1 out in the market. That certainly has caught my interest. All right, let me preview this one quite simply. We have a juggernaut here in Texas A&M. They went 49-13 to get here. They spent plenty of time this season as the number 1 team in the country. They're 5-0 so far in this tournament. They scored 25 runs in the Super Regionals and have Ryan Prager on the bump for Game 1. But Florida, as I mentioned, they go from preseason darling, top 3, to basically the season's falling apart. And now they've realized all this preseason potential by basically playing their best baseball when it matters the most. So when I look at like kind of the breakdown on this, you look at the staff. That was the reason why they had so many struggles for most of the regular season. They finished 11th in ERA, not in the country, in the state of Florida. Bethune-Cookman, Florida International, all with the better staffs in terms of pure ERA. But when you look at this run, in the regionals, they hold Nebraska to 2 runs. They beat Oklahoma State in a back up against the wall situation, needing to win 2. They beat them 5-2 and 4-2. And then their bats come alive in the super regionals. They use 21 runs in 2 games to dispatch Clemson. But critically, when it comes to bracket 2, and if you're interested in Florida, you look at the path. The Gators have won their season series against the Aggies, and they shelled the previously invincible Ryan Prager. They ran him off. He didn't get out of the 3rd inning, 7 hits, 6 earned runs. They have the lineup to do it again at Charles Schwab Field. And, when you look down the line, if they play a team like Kentucky, there's another team, even though they had struggles this year, they lose the season series. but they were +6 in the run differential. They go to extras in each of those losses to the Wildcats. So when you see how they match up against other SEC teams in this Elite Eight, the final 8 teams here in Omaha, there's a lot to like about the Gators. Not least of which is they are red hot and the pitching is finally coming together. When you listen to their manager, he said it the whole season. We got young guys, they're green, give them time. Well, apparently he was a genius because now that they've had time and they're in the postseason, they're shining. What are your thoughts on the Gators at 15-1?
Yeah, I think what we talked about with NC State, where we want to take a sample, a slice of the last 15 games to see where this team is compared to integrating their numbers from back in February and March. That applies to Florida. 2 weeks ago, we podcasted in the regionals, and I said, well, the mathematics say Oklahoma State, but my gambling gut's telling me Florida's going to win this. Last week, it was the same thing. I'm not acknowledging these numbers against Clemson. Florida is the better team, the hotter team. Well, now we actually have some numbers to back this up. Over the last 15 games, the staff has generated top 35 ranks in XFIP Sierra. That has to build some confidence in what they're doing with Liam Peterson, Pierce Coppola, all the guys that are on this pitching staff that have struggled for so long. It's the freshmen and sophomores are growing up. And I think there's something to be said about already, like almost everybody on this roster was in Omaha last year for 11 days. I mean, I think that plays here. I think it plays more when we talk about who's going to win this bracket. But there's a lot of reasons to bet Florida here, not just recency, what they've done the last 15 games. Texas A&M is in trouble. You mentioned what happened to Ryan Prager when he went to Gainesville. 2 1/3 innings pitched, 6 earned runs, not good. That's got to be in the back of Prager's head. And he just got lit up against Oregon, not good in the opening game of the Supers whatsoever. Then there's the injury. I mean, Shane Sadao, pitching wise, he was their game 2 starter, had an injury. He was out of the Oregon game quick in game 2 in the Supers. Also, Braden Montgomery, one of their best hitters in the lineup. They have 3 of them that have hit over 20 home runs. He's one of them. He's a 3-hole hitter. He is out. So there are some serious injuries here going on. Texas A&M's already lost a series to Florida earlier in the year, and their ace is getting shelled, not just by Florida earlier this year, but in their past region against Oregon. Now, there is something with college sports that, I apply more than I do professional, which is when a basketball team or a football team or a baseball team loses a star, which they have with Montgomery in the offense, a college team generally always pulls it together for one game and has their best outing. And you see those odds move on injuries, and then you see teams able to overcome that. Well, that happens for one game in college because everybody's amped up for it. But then after that, they get deflated. They had their amp up game against Oregon. I could not believe they came out and were on fire. No matter losing their pitcher after recording just one out, no matter losing their 3-hole hitter, they still beat Oregon with no sweat. I think they're going to be completely deflated when they get up here to Omaha. This is a Texas A&M team I think takes a loss here. I'm not looking at what I project Prager whatsoever because he is not on point. And Florida, which we'll get to in this bracket, it has to be extremely intimidating to 3 other teams when you were just here a year ago for 11 days. I mean, they know how to act. They know where to go. Nothing's going to surprise them or shock them on their trip up to Omaha. They're not going to get caught up in the hoopla of everything that's going on here. So I would take Florida. I bought them at 160. I'll buy them again this morning at 150. Other than that, I think I saw a 14-1 out there for them to make the championship round. I think you got to be buying. We've said this for a couple of weeks. You got to keep buying Florida here.
We talked about this, I believe, in the first college baseball episode of our season. Is there manager factor? Is there, something to be said for having an understanding of how to play this ballpark, of how to manage your rotations and your pen? Kevin O'Sullivan, this is his 9th trip to Omaha, and he's made deep runs in those other 8 trips. So he clearly is not going to be overwhelmed by the moment. The program has been here 14 times to the College World Series, where on the other end, you have, I know they're not matched up directly right now, but the Kentucky Wildcats making their first trip. Is there is either end of the spectrum overstated in terms of its importance? We talk about it too with the Stanley Cup, and you talk about teams that are making it for the first time. Are they nervous? Is there pressure on the other side if you feel like your window's closing? Any of those mental aspects go into your handicap?
I think if they've been there before and you have a coach like this, I think it plays into how steady they will be. They won't have moments of, like I said, deer in the headlights, gotcha, made a mistake, it's going to cost me 6 runs, right? That generally doesn't happen with teams that have a ton of experience on this kind of stage. So I don't expect Florida to have that, but I do expect Kentucky to make mistakes here over the course of however long they're in this tournament. Obviously probably the best pitching staff of anybody, especially in bracket 2. But what are you going to do about this Gators surge? I mean, they've been able, not only is this pitching staff up there in the top 35 ranks of XFIP and Sierra, but they've been top 10 all season in fielding percentage and home runs per game. I mean, we knew that they were could be a juggernaut offensively. They just needed some pitching. Now that they've got it, I wouldn't want to mess with them from a bracket 2 perspective. I love the NC State story, but it's going to drop off after Sam Highfield's out. I like the Kentucky pitching staff, but you are playing way too many games that are low scoring, and it's like a run line paradise for your opposition. So I'm not sure you have enough offense to do this, especially on Saturday. Right now, they're forecasting 30-mile-per-hour wind gusts coming in from the outfield. So it's going to be small ball here, and I just don't think that's going to play too well for some of these teams. But, Texas A&M with their injury information, I know that they were in Omaha 2 years ago, but it was, I believe, a pretty quick trip. I think they might have played 3 games, maybe 2. So, Florida is the one that's got the pedigree here. So I would take them to win bracket 2.
2 questions left here. The first, of these 8 teams, which staff, lineup, manager combination do you feel is best positioned to go through the losers bracket? So they lose early and then they get it together and still make a deep run. Which team do you think has what it takes to do that?
The loser of the opening game between Florida State and Tennessee is going to be able to run through the losers bracket in bracket 1. If Jamie Arnold gets torched for Florida State, Carson Dorsey has been pitching at a very high level there. And they offensively right now, Florida State is one of the hottest teams coming into this tournament in Omaha. So I think Florida State has a chance. If Tennessee gets into the losers bracket, which wouldn't surprise me because of the curse of the number 1 overall seed, they have Drew Beam ready to go in the losers bracket. They have Drew Beam ready to go in the winners bracket. So from a second string pitcher, Tennessee has the advantage. From an overall staff and offensive metrics, Florida State has that. So I think this Florida State Tennessee game opener is also what we're going to see in the bracket finals.
And question 2, who do you have in the championship round?
Yeah, let's go with the third Saturday in October. Let's go Tennessee. Let's go Florida. Florida, I feel much more confident about in bracket number 2, mostly because of the experience that's been there. They're holding Jack Caglione until game 2. This whole team has been there before. Like you said, their manager has been there 9 times. Texas A&M, the injury situation scares me. NC State, the pitching falls off after Highfield, and Kentucky's just playing too many games with close margins. And then on the other side, I truly think this is a coin flip between Tennessee and Florida State. The loser of that game in the opener has the pitching staff and the offense to get through the losers bracket. I mean, Drew Beam is their second guy in line for Tennessee. That's a good one. Carson Dorsey's been pitching great for Florida State. So I believe the winner of that is going to be waiting as the loser of that game goes through the losers bracket and meets them again. So definitely that's it. And as much as we've loved North Carolina all year, the fact that DeCaro has really been struggling in his last couple of outings, the fact that some of the ACC teams that are represented in this bracket, and then also NC State on the other side, have beaten them in regular season ACC series. North Carolina did not get a good pull of ACC teams here. They've lost all of these teams. So we're going to go with Tennessee, Florida in the championship round. Wouldn't be surprised if Florida State snuck in there over Tennessee.
I mean, soon in the SEC, it's going to be divisionless. So this SEC East rivalry, getting to play in the championship round, I actually like that. I think Florida is going to get the best of the balls. I will say I'm going to sprinkle on Virginia at their number. Make sure to shop around. I saw some 12, some 13 to 1s out there in the market. As I mentioned, it really pays to have a diversified lineup. 8 hitters batting over 300, being able to put the ball in the gap in this cavernous ballpark with all these wind conditions. I think that's the way to win. And the fact of the matter is they did it already against North Carolina. So if they can get off to a hot start, win early, and then be in the winner's bracket, I really like what the Wahoos are bringing to the table in terms of, at least by their price, their value, where they are right now. And the biggest thing, we've harped on it throughout this entire episode. What are you today? This kind of feels to me like the Stanley Cup playoffs, where it doesn't matter that number next to your name. It just matters how you played in the last series, the series before that. That's regionals, that's super regionals. And when I'm zeroing in there, the Wahoos have looked absolutely, immaculate throughout this run. So I think they're being undervalued here. Outside of your championship matchup, Florida against Tennessee, any other team that you think is worthy of at least some couch change in terms of a futures play?
I do agree with you from a Virginia perspective because they were here last year, right? They did play, I believe, 3 games. Or maybe it was a 2 and Q, but they also have been here before for this entire roster. I believe, we've already taken them for the run line in the opening game. I think they can beat North Carolina and give, in the winners bracket a little bit of a rumble. But besides that, nobody is firing on all cylinders than the 500 team that you and I have talked about all year, which is the Florida Gators. So, NC State, they're out for blood. If you don't know the history behind this team, they were essentially kicked out due to COVID-19 protocols in 2021. They had made the winners bracket final against Vanderbilt, and Vanderbilt was struggling in 2021. NC State was well on their way after beating Arkansas in Fayetteville in the Supers. They went to Omaha, won a couple games. They were about to get into the championship series. COVID-19 protocols took over, and they didn't have enough players on their roster. And the NCAA, instead of allowing them to go another day, disqualified them. There is no more fan base showing up red hot pissed and ready to rumble than NC State. So from a motivation perspective, we can't completely just sweep them under the carpet, but I do think Florida's got the pedigree to take bracket 2.
All right. How can people keep track of all of your content on the app, on the website? Because I know you're going to be breaking down every single matchup as well as the pitching, the win situation. Where can they find it?
Yeah, we're going to be on site, myself and one of our editors at Action Network, Pete Rudin. We're going to be there in the press box, and we will be writing and projecting and tweeting, and everything will be in a College World Series notebook file. And there will be a sheet for everybody to check out, and we will have projections for sides, totals, projected pitchers. And as we're putting that up, we will be down in the locker rooms interviewing the players. And if there's anything that catches my ears, it just like me at the national title game for football, or me at the Final Four for March Madness, if I hear anything that's useful to any of us, of course, I will put it out as quick as possible. So I would say definitely keep that notebook file that Action Network will put out. I'll be putting journal entries in there every time a game concludes.
For Colin Wilson, I'm Mike Calabrese. This has been the BBOC podcast presented by BetMGM. We're going to be back next week on Thursday. As soon as this wraps up on Wednesday and we have some pitching matchups and we know what to look forward to, we're going to give you another full breakdown. So be sure to check back in for that. And as we teased earlier in the week during the breakdown of my book, Legendary Bowl, getting into the greatest college football teams of all time, college football season is just not that far away. Preview season starts in earnest end of July, beginning of August. We're probably going to sprinkle in 1 or 2 college football episodes before then as well. So make sure to update your feeds. Thanks so much for listening. And a reminder to everyone, 5-star reviews, they help us so much in terms of our reach, in terms of the momentum that we have as a program. So go ahead. Doesn't matter what you say, throw in a 5-star review. Then we'll get back to you either with some Action Network swag or another $10 free parlay or futures ticket courtesy of myself. So that's it for us. Thanks so much for listening and enjoy the College World Series.